We are here together for the very first time, celebrating living erotically in every dimension of our lives, and both feeling outrageous love and feeling outrageous pain, and feeling each other over Zoom, right? Really feeling each other. This world can be very painful, and you all give me permission to live the greatest invitation, the greatest story possible, the cosmoerotic human story, being Homo, Amor, to be completely in love with life and with all of reality, no matter what it brings us, no matter what challenge it's asking us to face. And with the great mystery or the goddess, to not turn away from the outrageous pain.
I feel so grateful for this amazing space and also humbled to begin to share a little bit from my journey with studying, of course, the Dharma, and studying especially a return to Eros, which is what we will be talking about today. So I want to begin with just thanking Dr. Marc Gafni and also Dr. Christina Kincaid for writing this amazing book, which I've read, I think now already maybe 3 times, and it just keeps on deepening and deepening. It's just kind of become my new Bible, honestly. But I want to begin today with kind of setting our intention, as we always do, and creating and remembering together this evolutionary context that we are in. Because as we always say here, we live in a time between stories, and we live in a time between worlds, and we're facing catastrophic and existential risk. And we're talking today about Eros, and I want to begin with exploring, why are we talking about Eros in the midst of existential risk? Why is this actually important? And so Dr. Marc Gafni has articulated 2 generator functions for existential risk. And the first one is the win-lose metrics that we live in. And this is the world system that we created based on the belief that we are separate selves, that we are not connected to the whole. And if we believe that we are separate selves, then we need to create a system where we can actually win. And it means that if my separate self wins, then your separate self loses. So we all know that this generates a world full of war and fighting and suffering and poverty. Now, the second generator function is that we live in a world that is a complicated system and not a complex system. And the difference between a complicated system and a complex system is that a complicated system, there's no allurements between the parts. And Marc always explains this with the examples of a Ferrari, which is a complicated system, where the parts have kind of put together, but they don't communicate with each other, and they're not alive with Eros and not animated with Eros. So the parts are not part of the whole. And an example of the complex system is the jungle, is the rainforest, or maybe also when we're healthy, our very own body, where all of the cells are constantly dancing together. The cells are communicating with each other. The cells are intimate with each other. And so Eros is what generates a complex system. So when Marc speaks about these generator functions, he also goes actually underneath to the root cause of these generator functions, which is what he calls the global intimacy disorder. And in a global intimacy disorder, there's a failure of Eros. There is no allurement between the parts. And so when we're talking about existential risk, we can also begin to see why the only response to existential risk is actually a return to Eros. When we regenerate and reanimate our world with Eros, meaning the radical aliveness between the cells, the allurement between the cells. And Marc also speaks about this, like Eros is the unique configuration of allurement and autonomy. So Eros is kind of the glue that keeps it all together, but it's not a static glue. It's actually a liquid and a fluid and a moving and a dancing glue. So the invitation today is to animate our reality with the new story of Eros, this new story of cosmo-erotic humanism. And sometimes that can feel overwhelming. Sometimes existential risk can feel overwhelming. And there's this phrase in the Dharma that says that there's a gap between our ability to feel and our ability to heal the pain in the world. And we cross that gap by realizing that we are not a separate self, but we are a unique expression of the field, and that our unique life actually participates in this larger field. So our unique personal transformation actually participates in the larger transformation of the entire field. So when we realize that, we can actually become sacred activists. We can consciously begin to choose our actions, which we call our outrageous acts of love. And we can consciously participate in the evolution of love. And so knowing that, it begins actually interesting to ask that question: how can I live erotically in every dimension of my life? So that is the question for today, and we're going to talk about what that actually means. But first, I want to give my word to you, David, to read for us the code, please. Thank you so much.
How can we live erotically in every dimension of our life? Why would we even be asking that question, right? It's like, wow, this is the new story we're invited to open our minds to. So the code is actually a code that helps us clarify our worldview. And some people might ask, why do we even need language? Why can't we just be love, right? Be in love. Well, we can't just be in love. Actually, our worldview creates this experience to a large extent. And so the code is a way that we can enter into this deeper field, this new story that Krista so beautifully outlined for us today. So here's this week's evolutionary love code. The infinite is intimate. Infinity desires finitude. The desire for intimacy screams yes. Infinity cries out yes to finitude. The Big Bang, the great flaring forth, is the erotic ecstatic yes of the infinity of intimacy, affirming radical goodness, truth, and beauty of existence itself. It's so beautiful. I'm just going to resonate it one more time. The infinite is intimate. Infinity desires finitude. The desire for intimacy screams yes. Infinity cries out yes to finitude. The Big Bang, the great flaring forth, is the ecstatic, erotic yes of the infinity of intimacy, affirming the radical goodness, truth, and beauty of existence itself. And I turn my word back to you, beloved Krista.
Thank you. Thank you, David. I love feeling as you're speaking those words, how it's actually coming alive in the space between us. And the question, how do we give that erotic, ecstatic yes to cosmos over and over and over again? And how do we live inside that infinity of intimacy? But also the question, what happens if we don't? And I want to begin there. What happens and how do we feel when we're not living in Eros? And I think we all know that experience. And I described in the beginning the win-lose metrics, feeling separate from everything else. And this is causing depression, and it's causing loneliness. And it feels like we're a fish on dry land and we don't have water. Or it can feel like we're a tree, but we're cut from our very roots that are nourishing us with the juiciness and the waters of the earth. It feels like a butterfly that is imprisoned in a jar, but it doesn't have the oxygen to breathe. So when we don't have Eros, we slowly die. And we live in a culture that doesn't really have a narrative to hold the fullness of our desire for Eros. And so I imagine our culture as being the fishbowl that we're swimming in, or the water that we're swimming in. And we're constantly breathing this, and we're constantly living inside of this. And what happened in our culture, and what happened in many of our lives, is that we exiled Eros into sexuality. So the relationship between Eros and sexuality, and understanding that deeper, is what the book A Return to Eros is all about. So when we exile Eros into sexuality, it means that we place the fullness of our yearning for wholeness, for connectivity, for being on the inside, being in the fullness of presence. And we place all of our yearning and all of our desire for Eros, and we put it into sexuality. And we demand from our sex that it gives us the fullness of that experience. And often in our lives, when we don't live in Eros, we live in pseudo Eros. And a lot of people live like this, where we don't enjoy our work, and we have to go to work for 40 hours or maybe more, even though we're not inspired by it. And our relationships maybe aren't fulfilling. And then we expect from our sexing to give us kind of that hit of Eros. And when we do that for a while, maybe it may work, but over the long run, sexuality cannot hold the depth of our yearning, and then sexuality collapses. And what we need to do is liberate our Eros from sexuality. So it's kind of hidden in sexuality, and we actually have the power to liberate it. But to be able to liberate it, we need a new narrative to hold the fullness of Eros. And in our culture, until now, we had 4 sexual narratives that actually didn't have the capacity to take us home. And these narratives are more fully described in A Return to Eros, and I recommend you to read them. But because of time, I'm just going to go through them a little bit quickly. But the narratives that we currently know in our culture are sex negative, meaning sex is bad. You can think about religion. Sex positive, the whole sexual revolution, where we could have all the sex in the world, but it didn't actually give us the fulfillment that we were looking for. And then we have sex neutral, where sex is kind of seen, studied as in a scientific way, and seen as a biological chemical reaction. And they say there's no difference actually between having sex and having lunch. It's just neutral, it's the same. And then the 4th is sex sacred, where the story is that sex is sacred because it creates babies. But as Dr. Marc describes in the book, we all know that we have sex for more reasons than just to create babies. So all of these stories are true, but partially, and they don't have the capacity to take us fully home where we want to be, in that Eros, in the experience of radical aliveness. So what Dr. Marc Gafni and Dr. Christina together beautifully did is articulate a new story of sexuality. And not only that, it's actually a new story of what they call, also together with other thinkers, of cosmo-erotic humanism. And so in this new story of sexuality, it's what they call the sex erotic story. So in the sex erotic story, what we know is that actually all of reality is Eros. So there is no split between sexuality, the erotic, and the holy. So part of living in the new story of the sex erotic is healing that split and reconnecting the sex and the holy. And in the lineage of the Hebrew mystics, they actually say that sexuality is the seat of all wisdom. And that is because they say sex models Eros, but it doesn't exhaust it. So in sex, actually, we can find models and inspiration and knowledge and deep wisdom about what it means to live erotically in every dimension of our lives. And sex actually has the capacity to teach us how we can live a meaningful life if we are able to treat sexuality in that way. If we stop using sexuality to cover up our emptiness and actually, as it were, kind of bow down to sexuality and say, wow, what can you teach me about life? And so to be able to return to Eros, we need a different approach to sexuality and stop using it as a cover-up for our emptiness, but actually become erotic activists, as we call it, and consciously liberate Eros from sexuality. And so I wanted to share a practice with you. And we're not going to do the practice here, but I want to kind of share the inspiration with you, and you can do it in your own time, and you can actually make it as erotic and intimate as you like. But whenever we find ourselves in a moment of contraction, we always say here that we encourage ourselves and each other to take responsibility for our own arousal. And that's actually one beautiful way how we can liberate Eros, is to arouse ourselves. And so whenever we are in a moment of contraction or fear, or we're triggered, or something is hurting us, which happens in life, which is normal that it happens. But the question is, how do we respond to that? Do we choose to open the moment, to love the moment open, as we say, or does the moment remain closed? And we have the capacity to love the moment open. And one of the ways to do that is to actually ask sexuality to be our teacher. And so in sexuality, we have this beautiful, beautiful pleasure of orgasm. So we can ask ourselves, what can orgasm actually teach us about life? And one of the things is that in sexuality, we especially in tantric sexuality, when we grow and we expand our capacity to be orgasmic, what we do is actually we invite ourselves to breathe more. So take a breath. More breath, more sound. So you can also take a breath with sound. And more movements. So you can invite your body to move, to shake. Maybe you want to dance. So those are 3 ways to kind of shift your awareness from contraction and expand into your own orgasmic capacity. And another way to do that is to engage the senses. So I brought this beautiful little playmate where you can actually begin to arouse yourself like that. And you can just caress your own hand and kind of meditate on the experience of these beautiful feathers touching your own hand, and kind of meditate on the knowing that we live in an intimate universe, and the intimate universe lives in us. And as you're doing that, you can breathe into it, you can sound into it, you can make music, you can expand your awareness into your own orgasmic pleasure power. And then you can pour all of that energy into the situation that was triggering you at first. And the way to do that is not by covering up the pain that you felt before. So the first step is actually to acknowledge what you're feeling, and acknowledge what is happening in that moment for you, and be with that for yourself. And then to bring that pain, as it were, to the altar of Eros, and to invite yourself into a different experience, and to remind yourself with touch and with tenderness and with arousal that actually is true. We live in an intimate universe, and the intimate universe lives in us. And so in A Return to Eros, Dr. Marc Gafni and Dr. Kincaid have actually articulated 12 phases of Eros, 12 ways, 12 principles of how Eros, sexuality teaches us about Eros. So one of the phases that I wanted to share with you, and we're going to end with that, is the 8th phase of Eros, and it's called giving and receiving. And what is beautiful is that every chapter starts with a section called the sexual models, the erotic. So there is described a beautiful way how the sexual models, the erotic, in the face of giving and receiving. So what can we actually learn from sexuality about Eros? So I wanted to read you a few sentences. You see, built into the sexual is an enormous desire to give, particularly to give pleasure. In virtually all arenas of living, most of us are perpetually on the prowl for the best deal. And the best deal is always about getting the most while giving the least. And the great exception is the sexual, because in sex, being a great lover is taken to mean that you give your partner an unbelievable, unforgettable experience. And so the ability to give pleasure, the more the better, is considered to be a great honor, a virtual badge of merit, as well it should be. Yet we need to expand this desire to give to apply to so much more than just sex. Sex models eros. It should not exhaust eros. The erotics of giving must engage every facet of existence. Imagine if we brought into every realm of this life this standard of giving. Imagine if all of us were willing to forfeit feeling some of our own pleasure, our own comfort, in order to further the pleasure and the comfort of another. People who behave this way consistently over long periods of time are called saints. They are the Mother Teresas of the world. And paradoxically, it is in the sexual that the glimmerings of sainthood first appear. For it is in the sexual that the greatest hero is the one who gives the beloved with the greatest pleasure. The eros of delight arouses the ethic of devotion. So the Persian poet Hafiz writes, even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, you owe me. Look what happens with a love like that. It lights the whole sky. And with that, I turn my word to you, beloved Christina. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, again. Many of you have heard me talk about, well, first of all, thank you, Krista, for bringing us into that deep dive of return to Eros, and also for that invitation of together and in our lives, becoming the erotic mystic in every moment through all of our interactions. So that's what I also want to deepen here. So to start with, many of you have heard me talk about my brother Jay many times. And yesterday was his birthday, September 3rd. And so all day long, I'm working on what am I going to do today? And I'm thinking of each of you, imagining each of you, like Colleen and Kirsten and David and Gabby and Arnaud and Leo and Joycey and on, my dad, Shahat, Jane. And so, and some of you are here and some of you are not. And but I know you're here in spirit. And so I'm thinking about my talk and I'm nervous and I'm feeling your love and I'm feeling into my desire to penetrate into what it means to me to be living erotically in every dimension of life. And I'm feeling myself invite the cosmos to be alive in me. And what does that even mean? And then I'm feeling the edges of where we could go together today. And then I realize it's my brother's birthday, and that again, all around me, important things are happening for me yet again on September 3rd. So this is a recurring magical day for me. And it has been ever since my brother was born back in 1967. And so like preparing for sharing this talk with you all, it's just magical. And then also, On September 3rd, 5 years ago, Dr. Marc Gafni asked me to study with him. And because it was that date, I just instantly said, absolutely. And that was the day I devoted my life to the study and practice of this cosmo-erotic humanism dharma. And so my brother would have been 55 yesterday, but he died when he was 13 years old. He was hit by a car while he was riding his bike, and the car caught his back tire, pushing the front tire into the curb and forcing him and his bike under the car. The driver had passed out from a new pharmaceutical cocktail, and it was indeed very, very traumatic for everyone. Besides the repeating patterns of big life events happening on my brother's birthday, my brother's story is my personal, most historical and repeating portal into the intimate universe. Why? Well, my brother's story is tragic, but it's also a story of greatness. He transformed everyone's life who he was close with. He actually saw his death. For a year and a half before it happened, as a 12-year-old, he knew that there would be an accident that would kill him when he was young. He knew that it would have to do something with the green car. And he said he'd be up above his body watching people try to bring him back to life, but that they wouldn't be able to, and that he was okay with it. He picked the song Stairway to Heaven to be played at his funeral. So for me, as a young person who was 16 and 17, someone who was very close to my brother, I knew someone who saw the future. I knew someone who saw himself above his body after a very tragic accident in the future. And I knew someone who was okay with his young death. And I knew someone who wanted us to pay attention to this intimate universe, this universe that is just so mysterious and so full of eros and outrageous love and outrageous pain. So his story is always inviting me to deepen in the mysteries of this wondrous world. And his story brought me to the Dharma of cosmo-erotic humanism. And it's teaching me how to live with great aliveness. Like, it is stunning. It is absolutely stunning that I personally am alive today and that we are here together for the very first time, celebrating living erotically in every dimension of our lives, and both feeling outrageous love and feeling outrageous pain and feeling each other over Zoom, right? Really feeling each other. This world can be very painful, and you all give me permission to live the greatest invitation, the greatest story possible, the cosmo-erotic human story, being Homo, Amor, to be completely in love with life and with all of reality, no matter what it brings us, no matter what challenge it's asking us to face, and with the great mystery or the goddess, to not turn away from the outrageous pain. Barbara Marx Hubbard always said, to give our gift is our heart's desire, in love with one another. When we are in love with one another, what happens within us creates more joy, more peace, more excitement within us, and more awareness of the God, or the goddess, or the great mystery, or the cosmos, or consciousness, or eros within us. The God within, to give our gift, to be intimate with the universe, to be living erotically. And so now I have a short slideshow for you, and it will just take me just a second to bring it up. And I want to appreciate Jamie Long for helping me to create this. And so I will share my screen. And this slideshow starts with and is all about how do I live erotically in my day-to-day life. And so truthfully, photography has given me this deep access into capturing a moment in time and studying it and asking each day in my unique moments, from waking up to the miracle of being alive, to brushing my teeth, to the miracle of a body, to afford timing the radical goodness, truth, and beauty of existence itself, the quilt of being. And here I am in Lake Wisconsin, snapping a picture of my feet splashing the water, and then looking at that image and looking at all the mystery, the miracle, the beauty, the lines and the circles, the fractals of light. And I'm feeling like I'm moving inside the mind of God. And it is a love affair with all of life. And it is the intimacy of the infinite. I'm alive in this moment, and I am in an erotic state. So, slide 2, water, the infinity of intimacy with water. I'll often be in my car and have the rain pouring down on my windshield, and then I'll take pictures of what's going on around me so that I can see how I am not a discrete unit. I am connected with all of reality. And it's such deep pleasure to kind of feel into this field of light and motion and what happens relatively to my perception, my consciousness with what's going on around me, the interconnectivity and the mystical laws. And that brings us back to a return to Eros, which on chapter about the fourth face of Eros is all about our wholeness and our interconnectivity, our felt sense of being one with the cosmos, of having the universe alive in us and of us and through us. And so watching light in motion through rain on a windshield gives me the felt access to myself as the field and the witness. We are rocks that make sense. We are made of the same stuff as stars. Our parts have been in tremendous explosions way before we traveled through our mother's wombs. And I thank again and again the miracle of finding a home here with you all and the Dharma of Dr. Marc Gafni and Barbara Marx Hubbard. So, continuing to draw pieces from a return to Eros, we come from intelligent patterns of the universe. I walk outside and I look for these patterns, these intelligent patterns, and I see a bucket on a table in the winter, and I pick it up, and underneath it, it has this tremendous pattern of ice and wholeness and interconnectivity. This whole world arises from this infinite intelligence. And everywhere I look now, I can find this infinite intelligence mysteriously arising all around me. And in that, my awareness, my attention is all about being erotic in the intimacy of this infinite intelligence. So when I get lonely and there's nobody around, I will look for ways that this world of light and mystery, how it is all in a fluid flow of a field of Eros and intimacy, and that everything is fundamentally interconnected. And I erotically rely on being connected to the most beauty, the most love, the most interconnectivity. And for instance, this image right here that that is me looking through water from the fountain at the castle of the amazing, outrageous love festival that we had this last August, just a few weeks ago. And I'm capturing a unique slice of time. I'm penetrating something wholly unique, something with dimension, with alluring colors. And I find even a deep personhood within this image of water. Living erotically, the process of being growth as creation, transforming consciousness into beauty and witness, the practice of living into the unseen world of infinite intelligence. Now for the human world, there's our beloved Jacqueline and our beloved Leo. And I just want to give a shout out to Jacqueline, who was in the hospital this week and who had a seizure and fell and bruised up her face. And here she is a few weeks ago, right after the festival with Leo. And yes, the universe feels, and the universe feels love. And we right now in this moment, just through your body, can feel the love for Jacqueline, for each other, and for healing, and for people repairing their bodies after they had an injury and an accident. So Jacqueline, we send our prayers out to you. So finally, to live erotically, to feel the story of the whole, I realize the evolutionary process lives in me. The whole 13.8 billion years lives in me. And this summer, the migratory monarch butterfly was listed as an endangered species. That 99.9% of its population is gone over the past 40 years. Last night, I read a statistic online that 40 years ago, there was 10 million migratory monarch butterflies. And I still am in shock and can't make sense of this, but that now there's only 2,000 monarch butterflies. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I just cannot believe that there's only 2,000 of these butterflies. It breaks my heart completely. And back to my brother's story, my brother taught me to know, to lean into the intimate universe, to not resist, to live close to death, to see the future. And yesterday I had another amazing, miraculous unfolding on my brother's birthday, September 3rd, which was that for the first time in my life that I can remember. 2 weeks ago, I found a monarch caterpillar, and I wasn't sure what to do with it, but I ended up bringing it in and putting it in a jar, and it turned into a chrysalis. I had the jar. It was a big jar all full of milkweed, and it ate and pooped, and then it turned into an incredible chrysalis. And then on Friday night, September 2nd, I was looking at it. It was very dark, the chrysalis. And so I thought, oh, in the next couple of days, it's going to hatch. It's going to emerge from this chrysalis into a monarch butterfly. And yesterday morning, I woke up and this monarch was fully out of its chrysalis with its wings hanging down. And it was just such a delight. And so I spent the whole morning with this monarch that was drying its wings and flexing its wings and learning to fly. And I just felt such tremendous intimacy with the cosmos and with the continuity of consciousness and with the mystery that is all around us, and also with the suffering, the tremendous suffering of these extinction threats, these extinction realities that we're all facing. And just to bring that through my body, both in the most true way and in the most hopeful way, and also in really directly facing it. And so back to a return to Eros, I personally am not okay with extinction in the least. I think it's completely the wrong way for consciousness to go. And a quote from Dr. Marc Gafni and Christina Kincaid from A Return to Eros is, a desire to survive is just that, an interior desire that is built into the deepest fabric of reality, all the way up and all the way down. The drive to survive is an erotic interior.